Yep, and also, okay, big. Well, unfortunately, we weren't able to air it because we were busy airing the men's game against Albany. What do you want to start with? Because neither is such a great story. Because neither is going. They're pretty much. I mean, the men have one more game to play, and the women are done.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, Ken, that's up to you.
I was gonna say, I think the women obviously potentially putting a ball on their season. We were talking earlier about how big this weekend was, and we were pretty confident they were going to win at least one, if not both of these games. Didn't end up happening. That was a shock, and couldn't have come really at a worse time, man.
Yeah, because this is their first losing streak. First time they lost 2 in a row all year long, and it came at a time, and I knew this was going to be a problem because Albany had gotten hot and Maine had gotten hot, and Vermont was getting hot. I mean, you take a look at that America East standing for the for the women for women's basketball. You got Albany, Vermont, and Maine chasing Stony Brook, and Stony Brook was never really able to pull away like the Vermont men have. So they go in and they drop the last 2 games, and that gives Maine opportunity to extend their winning streak to 12 games. They won their last 12 games and basically steal the America East regular season title because they got lucky in their schedule in that their last regular season game was against UMBC, and they had a makeup against UMBC today. And UMBC is where? Dead last. So I believe they still have another game left to play. Not that it really matters much. They lost 7 in a row. They're 2-13 and 3-22 overall. But to count on the only thing you had going for you maybe is because Maine was playing a back-to-back. Maybe UMBC could catch Maine flat-footed, but they played the back-to-back too. And Maine ends up winning. They finish the season at 18-10. They get the top seed. Stony Brook would be in the 2 if they were participating at all, which wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. But now, forget about WNIT, forget about at-large, forget about any of that.
Yeah, well, it's amazing. It's amazing that 23-5 could feel so bad.
Well, look, it's not their fault. It's the America East Conference's fault. I will not pull punches when it comes to the America East Conference. They're going to be by losing Stony Brook and they're going to be losing other schools too down the road. I'm sure Albany and Binghamton have their sights set elsewhere, even though I have no use for them either because they voted against Stony Brook too. If they lose their automatic qualifiers in certain sports, world's smallest violin, folks, I really don't care because what they did was nefarious. Okay, it was really a rotten thing to do to Stony Brook's athletes, and we'll never forgive them for it.
Yeah, it absolutely sucks because, and we were just there at the senior day, obviously on Wednesday, and to see all those players, all those athletes, been here for years, obviously, folks like Annie Moore and really the graduates who are definitely out. Mackenzie Boucher, India Pagan, those 2 in particular, just from them really being the backbone of this organization with their veteranship and seeing that transition first under Coach McCombs, where they were in the midst of being contenders and ultimately did fall to better teams, obviously like Maine's, like Hartford's, but still fought hard to obviously winning the program's first title. And at least if you're Maine, you're pretty upset because you didn't beat us, they say. So you have the match next year. Well, and obviously Stony Brook wins and they become back-to-back champions. And for that opportunity to not even see them potentially defend their title, despite having such an amazing season, amazing record for these players, their season, their careers to end like this, it's just sucks. It feels wrong. To me, I feel like you really can't. You can't do it, and it's really gonna suck if another postseason tournament bracket is set and Stony Brook's not included in any. It's just too unbelievable for me for a team this good and with this much talent won't get picked up for one.
And again, out of spite, any excuse they come up with other than we don't like Stony Brook is I don't believe.
I would say they're I don't see them coming to CAA anytime soon. I'm thinking of Albany and Binghamton in particular. I don't see any of those teams joining with obviously with how Stony Brook was treated And again, that's just me taking my bias hat off. And it's going to be tough. And as you said, the American East, and they're losing. Losing in school sucks. And first, even if it was just Hartford leaving, it's still bad because you lose a school. Have to find another school to try to take their place. If not, you're just down. That school, that competitiveness, it's a big loss. But for Stony Brook, obviously, and just the size of everything of Stony Brook compared to the rest of the conference, how just more bigger it was, the talent they had, just all the players, what they brought, being perennial contenders in virtually every program, it's a huge loss, and it's not one you're going to get over. And definitely not one getting over by, taking teams from lower conferences, ranking-wise, and bringing them to the table. All it really does, it pushes your teams that are already there, like Albany and Binghamton, up. But you don't really see a growth in the conference that you saw that came in when Stony Brook came in. Stony Brook obviously started at the bottom, worked their way up, and losing Boston, it made that competition between Albany, Binghamton, and Stony Brook that much tighter. But you're not getting that anymore, and it sucks.
Well, the other thing, too, is that, when Stony Brook first joined the America East, it was largely because Hofstra and Drexel and they left, and that paved the way for Stony Brook to enter. But Stony Brook was considered, bringing up the rear, just like UMass Lowell was when they joined, and just like NJIT look what NJIT has done. Okay, what they've achieved in just such a short time. Now, they weren't, neither UMass Lowell nor NJIT were eligible for tournaments their first couple of years in, but they signed an agreement. They did it. That's whatever they're going to do, and they knew it going in. If this had happened during an off season, it would have been easier to take, not in the middle of it. But
it's unprecedented.
Yeah, it really is.
And for all the programs involved, obviously, UCI, who happened to them, and they actually got it rescinded. And unfortunately for JMU and Stony Brook, we're not seeing the same thing happen.
Yeah, well, the other thing about it is, too, that Stony Brook is joining a conference that did the same thing to JMU. So I think they're going to be campaigning to get that bylaw changed once they're in.
Yeah, well, you already heard that, obviously, interviewing players, Renee Ward, for example, coming on, and earlier today, check out that interview on WC Sports, the interview with her earlier this week. And that's definitely, I think, something at the top of their list. And, the veterans, the graduates, like I said, are definitely going to be championing that cause, that, their final season, they really didn't get celebrated, I think, the way they deserved, the way they should have, competing for a conference title or even in a tournament, assuming they don't get picked up. And, it's going to come down to, obviously, WNIT, or just a college independent tournament, if, there are any left, or D1. And it's going to be real tough. It's really the only way you can at this point, because America East hasn't rescinded it.
Well, a couple questions that I have about it is, I saw Anthony Palmer was the America East Player of the Week for lacrosse. I think maybe it was defensive, maybe it was just a regular Player of the Week for lacrosse. Are the players going to be eligible for postseason honors?
Ironically, I think they might be, because they're still getting Player of the Week awards.
Right.
And that would be the perfect example, the perfect opportunity to throw it back in their faces. Well, if the players received awards and rejected them, just like the 1972 Olympics, when Ken, of course, obviously this is 50 years ago, but yes. You probably know the story about U.S. versus USSR in the Olympics in Munich in 72, and then the officiating basically giving the game to the Soviets, and the U.S. getting stuck with the silver medal, and the U.S. team refusing to accept it. Though none of the players ever received the medal, they rejected them, and they didn't show up at the medal ceremony. So I think that they have that dinner and everything like that to give out the awards. I think Stony Brook shouldn't show.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough thing for a 20-year-old to do. I mean, it was obviously during the Olympics to have that occur as well, too. Some of them, by the way, put in their wills that they never want to receive those civil medals.
And yet they were they were college players, so they were 19, 20, 21-year-olds.
You're right. You're really right. Back then they were.
They were. This is before even many ended up in the NBA, but they weren't there yet.
But I did think it was ironic, like you were saying, for the women's lacrosse team to remove all the America East stuff because they're really an independent. And you're seeing the America East continue to promote the Stony Brook athletes. So to when it's good for the America East to have this occur, they'll take advantage of it.
Yeah, Anthony Palmer won Defensive Player of the Week last week, and then I could see the guys talking in the locker room saying, "Why don't you throw it back in their faces?"
Yeah, it is extraordinarily strange, and again, it really puts them in a tough situation. It just flat out sucks. I wonder if they're going to even be invited. Because for each championship, the player and the Player of the Year awards, they take place at the hosting site's school, and there's obviously meetings beforehand, and a big celebration beforehand, and obviously Stony Brook's not even going to participate. I don't think
it's usually the night before
invited.
The first game. Yeah,
right. So
you know what, Ken, that is a really good point, because that is when it occurs, right? That's when they give all the awards out.
Yeah. Yeah, because usually the first day of the tournament, you have the whole list.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And just going
and
back
with Stony Brook doing it, especially women's basketball team, they're going to be a lot of awards there.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, there will be a lot of awards there.
Because I don't care what Maine did, Stony Brook is probably the best team in that conference.
Right. Yeah, and again, just looking at
and they split against Maine, no less.
Exactly. Yeah, and just looking at the potential, invitations they could join. They could, be in one, the Women's Basketball Invitational, which was single elimination. It was 8 teams who weren't selected in the D1 tournament or the NIT. Manhattan, actually, last year, they played in one of those games. They lost to FIU, and eventually, that was won by Portland, I believe, or Chicago and Stetson. So... there's definitely one there. Another one, as you said, the WNIT, which has schools from conferences like the Sun Belt, Southern, Atlantic 10.
Well, I have the WNIT bylaws, so to speak. Okay, so it is a 64-team field, 32 AQs, and that would be, from all the conferences that didn't get the NCAA AQ, which would be, win the regular season, lose in the tournament, or the second team after that. Or if the regular season champion does win the tournament, the number 2 team gets it. Which could be very interesting, because if the Maine women's team wins the tournament, Stony Brook would be number 2 and would therefore be eligible for the WNIT bid.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but that would be their automatic berth. So there is a chance of that happening, unless So what I'm going to have to do? I'm going to call up the WNIT and find out what the issue is there. Okay, You got that. That is A, the highest finishing team in its conference regular season standings, and B, not selected for the NCAA tournament, which would be one bid conference losing the tournament, conference tournament. The team that fulfills this quality will earn the WNIT automatic berth, regardless of overall or conference record. Number 1. Number 2, at-large berths. The remaining team slots, which, the other 32, in the postseason WNIT will be filled by the top teams available. Any team from Division I will be considered. In selecting at-large teams, the WNIT committee will consider factors such as, not in any particular order, the NET, strength of schedule, win-loss record, strength of opponent schedule, record against top 100 teams, margin of victory, how well a team is currently playing, common opponents, late season win/loss runs, win-loss runs, the games against other potential invitees, and key injuries or COVID-related factors.
Right.
Okay? So basically, any old thing. Well, that's what the I in NIT stands for, invitational. So,
and of course, getting back to the women's basketball topic, just on the team itself, again, there's a lot of talent on this team. And just talking about some of that criteria, this is a Stony Brook program. Assuming today or yesterday was the last game, they finished the season averaging 68 points per game, which is more than 11 points more than their opponents. They shot 41% from the field, which is just insane, and including 25% per contest, as well as 30% from 3-point range.
That sounds like an at-large bid to me.
I was going to say, free throw wise, 76%. Rebounding, they out-rebounded their opponents 39-35. And this is a team, too, just great. Individually, Indy Pagan had a great season, led the team in scoring with Annie Warren, both of them finishing with an average of 12.3 points per game. Pagan, obviously a great forward, unstoppable in the post. She finished the team with 58% field goal shooting, as well as 167 rebounds. Annie Warren did a great job as well in her senior season. So shooting-wise, finished just under 40%, but shot 35% from three-point range. And Greg, Leah Morey-Wool was obviously one of your favorites, and she was a great, as I said, two-way player. 43% overall, 41% from three, and as well rebounding 132, which is third behind Naramore Vargas Reyes and India Pagan.
Yeah, I just thought that their team as a whole, and I'm really disappointed in how the season wound up. And then I'm certain that they're disappointed as well. I mean, they lose two heartbreaking games. The first to UMass Lowell, 70-68, and then to Albany yesterday, 57-56. I mean, what heartbreakers!
And that's the game that Centereach had in hand, and Albany just came back with their 2-0 run.
Yeah, and just to see that to occur, and in both games, UMass Lowell hitting a game-winning shot, and then Albany hitting a game-winning shot, and in both fourth quarters of both games, only scoring 9 points. You know, what a tremendous letdown for them, and it's got to be hard. You know, because listen, we're not even on the team, and we're railing about the injustice for what's going on with the America East. Can you imagine being on the team?
Well, especially you get the double whammy. 2 years ago, you get your season killed by COVID, and then that was beyond anyone's control. So but we know by interviewing the players that was devastating to them. But this is a knife in the back, by comparison.
Yeah, it really is, and I just like to.
You know how
you look at.
There's no way of sugarcoating it. It was politics involving university presidents, and it only affects the student athletes. And on twice, the university presidents of the America East say, we don't care. And that is, you know what? If you don't care, well, first of all, they're getting a scholarship. But if I'm paying tuition, I'm paying my tuition somewhere else. If you just prove to your own people on your own campus saying, we don't care about you, we only care about ourselves.
And it's sad too, because even just transitioning to the men's side, so we saw the impact happen there. To where immediately as soon as the news dropped, obviously guys like Elijah Alani announced they weren't returning to the team. Other players obviously took a leave of absence, whether due to injury or other reasons. And men's basketball team is, I don't want to say they're finishing with skeleton crew, but obviously they're using players who they weren't anticipating using this late in the season. Now, that's something Gino Ford said as much as well in his post-game press conference yesterday. And you got guys like Tyke Green, Tyler Stevenson Moore really stepping up this week.
And yet...
and yet it really is all for naught, Matt.
And yet they had a great win last night against Albany.
Oh, that is true. Yes, they had a great senior night, I think. Greg, obviously, you were there.
They had a really good, may have been the best game they played all year.
I agree. Defensively, for sure.
Yeah, you know what? It was just, for the men, what a nice game to finish up. You hope that the NJIT game on Tuesday isn't like an anticlimactic game for them, and they can kind of go out in style with a win against them as well too.
Well, they just don't like NJIT to begin with, so
yeah, yeah. So, and I have to give Coach Ford a lot of credit, because I think he endured a lot this year. With the team, and as we've been railing it on with the women's team, and how we feel bad for the players. I do feel bad for the men's team as well too, but I also feel bad for Coach Ford, because he's had a lot that he's had to deal with because of that. And if I could just go back to the women, the one thing and Ken, you brought up the fact that I'm a big fan of Wool, and you're right, but I think having Wool, Boucher, and Pagan on the same, not having them next year is just such a huge loss for them, because that inside-outside game and their ability to throw three bigs onto the court was just so much fun to watch. And to not have them back next year, not to be able to watch them compete for a conference championship is a huge disappointment.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, next year's team is going to look a whole lot different, really, for both programs, really for the women's side. And, Coach Langford, obviously, I don't think it'll be too much of an issue with how great they play this season. Greg?
Yeah, I think with the intensity for the women, you're going to see that continue. You just watching Coach Langford on the sideline. She she just displays that herself, and it's like infectious amongst the team. I think for Coach Ford, it's going to be an interesting move for him with the men's team. And I think I brought this up last week when I spoke to Coach Gallardi, and he kind of had brought up, you want to bring in transfers, you want to bring in guys on the portal, and that's important to do so nowadays in college sports. That's the landscape of college sports, but you have to be able to fit them into the culture of what you're trying to do. And I think that's a lesson. I don't want to say that I don't want to say Coach Ford, if you have a crystal ball, you know what's going to happen here. I mean, a lot of variables occurred this year for the men's basketball team, but I think that's got to be in the back of his mind moving forward is, listen, I don't want to go through another situation like we went through this year where things seem to be so chaotic. All right, where am I going to build the foundation of my program? Who's going to be the foundation of my program, and how do we do that moving forward?
Well,
He's
that's
going to probably be looking for some guys for that.
For the next couple of years, that's going to be the case because of the transfer portal. I mean, they're going to add the extended eligibility. That's something that all coaches have to deal with. And you saw the result of how it could go wrong, I think, with this team. And it is just another thing, and Anthony Gallardi actually mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, and we talked to him. It's just another thing for a coach to manage, and you can't just go all in with the transfer portal or something like that, because let's face it, if you do have a not so good team, you can improve it pretty quick with the transfer portal. The problem is you don't have the stable base that you're looking for. So yeah, these are things that you have to deal with. Okay, it's the top of the hour. It is 11:01 and 54 seconds. You're listening to the sports section live on WUSB Stony Brook. Matt Mankiewich, Greg Taylor, Ken Fermin here until midnight, and we have a caller, guys. So Jay from Centereach, you are on the air. What's on your mind? As if I need to guess.
Thanks, guys, for having me. I really wanted to talk about. I had two things, and the whole first one is about the whole bit with Stony Brook not being in the tournament. You guys might have played that to death, but if I can come back to that for a minute, and then Greg made a real good point just now about this year's basketball team, which I actually was also been thinking about a lot. But first one on the whole bit with them not getting eligible for tournament. I can't believe after a month that you guys are still surprised about this. It's when it's like, I know you're close to the program, but it's kind of like telling your girlfriend, I'm going to break up with you in 3 months. And
that's funny.
And the girlfriend says, go now.
I just need to keep repeating it until it hits, because it's like I need to see it essentially. I don't know why. There's something. I don't know why. I just think that I maybe was too optimistic, because we're gonna talk about baseball too, and trying to anticipate a full season, that's not gonna happen. But I literally need to see this week go by and Stony Brook not play games for it to hit that. Oh snap! These guys and girls really just got screwed out of conference title for something that, in terms of the players, wasn't their fault. It's I just really can't believe an entire conference is going to do that.
It doesn't make it any less wrong, Jay, and we have every right to point it out that.
Oh no! Well, I mean, I don't know.
I'm
not sure it's wrong. I mean, it's bad for the players, but I don't know that it's wrong per se, because I think the conference's first objective has got to be to protect the conference. So
that's
protect
fair,
it from what?
Well, to me, I can understand that point in the sense that you don't want your best programs
leaving. I mean, to protect it, to give schools pause before they just
I understand. I understand that point, right? Because obviously you want to protect the best programs leaving. You don't want to award the programs that are leaving. But again, this is such an unprecedented case to where again, it's not like Boston where it happened in America East. I think it was right then, but still, Boston, they gave a year heads up.
It happened with Boston. It's not unprecedented.
Well, no, again, that was before the season started. I'm talking about during these seasons.
And I also don't think it was right even then. But they didn't do it with Hartford. Why? Because Hartford was relegating itself.
Well, that's right. Hartford's not using the conference as a stepping stone. Hartford says, I can't keep up with you guys anymore.
The reality of mid-major college sports is that it is a stepping stone. These conferences are have to understand that. These schools understand that. Steve Peichel is in Rutgers because of that. Rick Sohl got a job at Navy because of that. Okay,
I get it.
this job, these jobs
the,
here, with some exceptions. I mean, Matt Sank seems to be pretty happy. He's been here 30 years, but he's the exception, not the rule.
No, I get that. I mean, I looked in the Sagarin rankings like last week, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, and Stony Brook was second in the America East, ranked 218th. Out of all, so there's every other America East school is worse than Stony Brook. Vermont was like 99th or something at the time. And then if you go compare that to where the CAA, Stony Brook would be, that 218 would be maybe towards the very bottom of the CAA. There were maybe 3 teams in the CAA who had a lower ranking than Stony Brook. So the second other point, and this is, schools would never admit to it, but if Stony Brook is out, their chances just got better. Not just by, just
that
the math.
Had a lot to do with it. They don't care about Stony Brook's athletes, but their athletes get a better chance, so much the better.
Yeah. So there's that part of it. And then, and there's also to send a message to teams in the future, I think. So those are the reasons why.
Yeah, and again,
I don't think that's incentive not to leave. I think that's incentive to leave.
Well, we discussed that part. I see when the news dropped that, hey, this is to send the message. You're all near Binghamton. Don't think about leaving. And if you do, don't think about leaving during the season because you're not going to win conference title. We mentioned that when the news dropped. But to me, I think if you have the power, if you're a Power 5 program, then, I understand it. To me, as a mid-major that's already struggling as it is, seeing the turnover from the administration side, seeing a new president come in, over the last year, seeing teams already dropping out over the past couple seasons, as we're seeing now too with Hartford, as well as Stony Brook, they're already struggling with schools as it is. And, to me, trying to instill this fear, I don't think it is going to work as intended, because I think when Albany and Binghamton do get that opportunity to go to a different conference, they're probably going to take it, especially with the moves they've been making and upgrading their facilities to get them as good as we see Stony Brook. So,
Ken, it's almost like the cost of doing business.
Yeah.
Is what you're looking at right now. Jay, I was disappointed for the winter sports, for the men's and the women's basketball teams, because I felt like they were in the middle of their seasons, and to have it pulled out from underneath them, I thought was wrong. I still don't like the fact that spring sports is going to have it done to them, but they at least hadn't started their seasons yet, so I kind of can live with that a little more. But for the men and the women, I thought it was really such a curveball.
At the time too, it's not like these were bottom of the league teams. They were 1 and 2 respectively. In the polls at the time, and since then, at least on the men's side, we've really seen that affect them more so than the women's side, with guys pulling out for one reason or another.
This is what I'm talking about with conference turnover. I just opened up the America East Wikipedia page. Among original members, and it was formed in 1979, Rhode Island was an original member. They're now in the A10. Holy Cross, they hung around until 1983, went to the MAC, and then the Patriot League. Canisius was there for 10 years, went to the MAC. Niagara, 10 years, went to the MAC. Colgate, 12 years, went to the Patriot. Northeastern, they were there till 05, and we played them for a few years in the America East. They went to the CAA. BU, 2013, Patriot. Okay. Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, in there now. Siena, 84 to 89, now in the MAC. Hartford, relegating themselves. Delaware, till 2001 CAA. Drexel, till 2001 CAA. Hofstra, till 2001 CAA. And Towson, till 2001. They went to the CAA. Okay? There you go, right then and there. Conference turnover since the America East was founded. It's about conference turnover. It's about adding in schools moving up and down.
Mostly up. Not too many down. So I guess, at the same way, if you just think about this in your own lives, I'm sure if you've left a job and you've given notice, most of the time they probably let you, work your last 2 weeks, but sometimes they don't. They just, depends on the kind of position you're in, but some places that you give notice, okay, you should go now.
Extremely rare, because the one thing that you usually do when you're giving 2 weeks notice is, hey, sometimes they don't want you to leave even then because the next person behind you isn't fully trained yet.
Well,
I remember leaving a job with full notice and everything like that, and then getting called back 3 weeks later. How do you do this?
Okay.
I said, okay, that's going to cost you.
But if you go to a competitor, a lot of times they'll say, no, go now. We don't want you working here if we know you're going to be taking whatever you're doing the next 2 weeks to a competitor. They do that, especially like in a sales position or something. So anyway, all right, so we talked that out. So good discussion. The other thing, and Greg talked about it while I was kind of just while you were getting around to me, about the men's basketball team. And with the transfers and everything. And it kind of ties into Alani a little bit. I was just thinking about this whole story, and I guess I was wondering, well, why did he leave Miami? Why did Stony Brook take him back? And the real question, which gets to what Greg said, is how did he go from being the best player on the team 2 years ago to a sub on a team that is not as good? And I think Greg might have answered
Legit question.
Yeah, and obviously that's something we're gonna have to, ask Coach Ford and Alani themselves. Hopefully, get them back on the show. I think just from what we know in terms of watching them throughout the season, I think one difference was Alani's injury. Obviously, had a leg injury. I forget I think he suffered it at Miami, so it impacted him there. And I believe even he said, in one of his statements that he wasn't really feeling quite right. Coming back from the injury earlier this season. So it was one of the reasons why he was on the bench. One reason why he obviously was on the bench, coming from the bench. But I think another thing too, again, there's probably more underlying factors there is, the changes from that team a couple years ago and, the system now under Coach Ford. And to me, it just felt like they were on two different systems. And, these guys, they just couldn't gel under the same system the way Alani plays and, how much, the offense ran through him at the time to, what we were seeing now to where guys like Roberts, Green, Stevenson Moore, Policelli, were, really the primary ball handlers often for better, but, sometimes too for worse with the slashing ability that Alani had. But he also, again, I think injury is playing a part in this as well, but he didn't really have that same, I think, factor that he had a couple years ago this season. And it probably weighed on his mind, that, he wasn't performing at the same level. And obviously you're coming from the bench and your graduates, your final season, probably felt slighted by that, whether it was because of those injuries or something else. And,
yeah,
probably
there was a weird quote in the Statesman about how he alluded to promises not being kept when he left, which
that was an interesting comment as well.
Spur has to do with playing time, I'm guessing, but
that would make the most sense to me. Yeah. Probably if not playing time, then definitely I think system. I think he was coming in anticipating it being essentially the same as it was a couple years ago, to where he was a lot of that team's offense. It was really him and Fermin, I believe, really, or it was him and Latimer that were really the 1-2.
It was him and actually Garcia really developed that year before he left too. So
yeah, and that's the other thing too in Snow for men's basketball is I think something key for them is just getting consistency, because there's been a lot of roster turnover, and it's definitely a big question. And you gotta imagine what's going on there, under Coach Ford and his guys, to where we look at a couple years ago, Latimer, Ochiri, Foreman, Mogi, all those guys were primary players, and they all transferred out. Greg.
Yeah, no, that was
Jay, I think it's one of those, like you were talking about, those life lessons. Like sometimes you just get, when you're telling me a 2-week notice, sometimes you just get asked to leave right then and there. I think this is one of those where it's like sometimes you can't wait in the same orders twice. And I think that's kind of like Olani's case. He's thinking about coming back to what the team was, and it's kind of completely different. 2 years later or a year later. So I think that's one of those things. And the chemistry changes. You come back, you're still a little injured. You're not getting back onto the court. But I definitely think it's like one of those warnings for the portal, like that the portal doesn't always mean success. Players can transfer, and it's not always greener.
Yeah, I also want to add too before you respond. I think it goes back to culture, because we see the women's program, we saw it under Combs, and we've definitely seen it this year under Ashley Langford, but they have the culture. They've established it. From McCombs, one thing she did was utilize a book that the entire team had to read, and they all talk about it and learn from it and grow from it. And they go back to that book throughout the whole season. Their championship year, they talk about pounding the rock because that was the book they used. Obviously, Coach Langford is something different, but you just see how close these girls are with each other and that chemistry there. Definitely see it on social media and on the court. And I don't feel like you see that same thing with these men's teams under Coach Ford. And potentially again, going back to that comment, a promise is not kept. You could imagine that there's a few guys there thinking, I'm coming into this team and I'm the officer, I'm going to have a lot of say in this, more so than other players, or, and maybe they're seeing, how much say or how much, go back to the chemistry on the women's side, how much they have. And it's just the same amount's not there. And you're seeing, or maybe it's with the coach as well, where, it's becoming more of, Ford's really running this offense, running his defense, and, you're not really allowed to do your own thing. You have to adjust to his system as opposed to really change it, like we've seen the women's sides do under both their coaches recently. Yeah. So that can be another factor as well. Jay.
Yeah, I was at the game last night, and the first one I actually got to see in person this year, and they played. They were actually working the ball inside, which was good. They which helped them a lot, which they hadn't seen them doing much. But the other thing that was weird, Albany had a huge roster. Stony Brook was down to 11 people that they listed on the little program that they give you with who's there and whatever. The team is down to 11 players. So obviously Alani was one. Policelli was not there, I don't think, or certainly didn't play. I don't know if he wasn't listed on I don't think he was listed on the sheet either, or he might have been, but he didn't play. So I'm wondering what's happening. If people left already that were not as prominent.
Well, you remember a couple guys, did leave, obviously due to injury. I remember Julio Jenkins missed the rest of the season because of orbital injury. He actually he's eligible to return for the upcoming game, but Coach Ford and him both opted not to have him return for the season. He'll be back next year, though. He was a great key in that offense. Juan Felix Rodriguez, I think, was another one who took a leave of absence. Alani, as we previously said. Yeah, they've definitely been battling the injury bug, and I think who was it? Roberts missed not the last game, the one before, the loss to UMass Lowell because he had a flu. So and that was apparently something that spread amongst the team. That's why assistant coach Picard wasn't there in yesterday's contest because he had the flu as well. So yeah, there's again definitely a lot of weird off-court things going on with that club, and again, it's really, I feel like ever since, as I said, the conference announced the rulings, it's just been one, it's just been a downhill struggle for them that they really had to battle to climb out of. And honestly, the fact they're still above 500 is impressive.
I'm sorry,
and the fact that they're still managing to get some wins along the way as well too. Every time I look at them and I feel like they're just about to, to slide off the side of the mountain and just kind of plummet. All of a sudden they come back and they get themselves a win like they did, yesterday against Albany. So I think that is a credit to the players that are still there, and it is a credit to Coach Ford as well too, that they are still getting that kind of effort. And like you said, Jay, you were at the game. You were, pleased with the inside-outside game from them?
Yeah, because usually when I've been watching them on TV, it's mostly just guys trying to take long-range shots. Very, usually I don't see enough them trying to get the ball inside. But they were doing that a lot last night, and it was effective.
We saw with Jaden Sales too. He had a great game, 15 points. His inside work. Also, they said, earlier in the season, they really should get him involved more. And yesterday, at least, he was able to get the opportunity, and he shined, I thought. Matt.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was a really good game for him. That was probably one of his best games of the season, I would imagine.
Matt.
Yeah.
Okay,
and
go ahead.
The other thing which I'm sure you talked about already, I don't want to rehash it, but I was actually watching the women's game at home till I had to leave, and I was shocked to find out that they lost.
All right.
They were up.
All right, well, I'll save that. Sid, thanks for calling me.
That was very shocking, yes. That was happening while the men's game was occurring. Okay, but Jay, thank you for calling in.
Sure, no problem.
Okay, enjoy. Please continue to listen. Okay, 631-632-9872, 631-632-WUSB if you want to jump in on the conversation. And we did talk about men's basketball while Jay was on.
Wait, I did want to make one other point about the men's basketball team. The one thing that I've been happy with or pleased with seeing is how Tyke Green has kind of expanded his role in the team and how his game has expanded, since we've seen some of these players step aside from the team for the various reasons that they have. So, 17 points against UMass Lowell, another 18 against Albany. He's now almost routinely putting up double figures.
Yeah.
And you all know about his rebounding prowess as well too. So he's one of those to me, one of the bright spots of a difficult season. He might be one of those guys that Coach Ford can lean upon as those foundational pieces, that we've been talking about. This is him and Anthony Roberts. Maybe they become the guys that become the foundation of the program.
Yeah, he has been a walking double-double the past month-ish, even more, longer than that, I think. He's someone I think, if he stays with the team, is going to make a lot of noise in the CAA. Matt.
Okay, then.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of like the verbiage that has to be kind of like removed from the men's basketball team is that if he stays with the team.
Yeah, that's sadly the point we're at now, unfortunately.
Yeah.
All those key guys leaving the past couple of seasons under Coach Ford.
Yeah.
And that's got to be another thing, too,
Which is what you haven't been hearing with some of the other programs, right? So, this is where Coach Ford is right now with his program. He's got to pull these guys in and say, okay, this is who we are, and this is where we're going, and come aboard. And if you're aboard, be part of it.